I also would find it hypocritical to say I didn't like Friends to Lovers because that's what happened in my real life. But yeah, I think it's cute. I think it can be fun.
I love that you're like, well, we're cute. So like.
Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corene from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Keep It Fictional, the book lovers podcast from the Port Moody Public Library. Now, it is said that romance is the glamour which turns the dust of everyday life into a golden haze. Okay. It is also said that true love is rare, and it's the only thing that gives life real meaning. Okay. It is also said that the very essence of romance is uncertainty. Maybe. And love is that condition in which the happiness of another person is essential to your own. Sure. Now, all of these quotes have to do with love, with romance. And as you may have noticed, dear listener, if you are watching us on Facebook, that there are only 3 of us here today. This is planned quite well, that we have chosen to talk about that which is romance. When our resident romance, I'm not going to use the word hater, but disliker is not present. So welcome to a very romancy episode of Keep It Fictional. I am Sadie, your host today, and I am joined by my book friends Corene and Emma. Now, we might be doing things a little bit differently on today's episode, but I want to start by just getting a general idea of what my book friends think about the romance genre. I feel like we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast back and forth, but I just want to get a good idea of whether or not you like romance, what you like about romance, what you don't like about romance, just a general feeling and idea of romance.
Sadie, I thought you were going to start with the quote that romance is dead.
Probably what I should have done.
I thought it was going to be like a very bold start to this podcast of like, actually, romance is dead, but we're going to talk about how it can still live on in fiction. The only place where it's real. Yeah. So yes, I am a big fan of romance. I love reading romance novels. I have no problems with romantasy. I have no beef with romance and enjoy kind of occasionally rubbing that in Virginia's face, and it's fine. I think that the romance genre is very exciting in some ways because it started to really push the definitions of its own borders. I think for so long, there's been like a very strict definition of what a romance novel is. We all have kind of the idea of the Harlequin with the lady whose clothing is experiencing a malfunction, and then usually a guy who like doesn't need shirts, no gods, no shirts, no masters. And there's like a lot of swooning going on, which is, I mean, I don't think I've ever like properly swooned in my life. I like outright fainted, but that's been a medical thing. So I love that romance is like pushing the boundaries in terms of like having conversations about race, about sexuality, about like different genre pushing. I think that the people working in romance now are really experimenting and doing exciting things and telling stories that necessarily haven't been told before, recycling and using old tropes in exciting ways. Yeah, I think it's a really dynamic genre that's like having a real moment. Do I love all of it? No. No, I don't love all of it. And I think book talk is, I'm puzzled by it. We've kind of talked about this on a previous episode. I don't really understand it. And at this point, I am too afraid to ask. But I think that it's led to such a resurgence of readers who necessarily wouldn't be picking up books because romance books are so accessible and fun to read. Like they are fun to read. And I think that's what makes them so popular. So yeah, big fan here.
Excellent. Emma, are you also equally enamored by romance novels or a little bit less so?
I would say less so. I like the point that Corene just made about how book talk specifically has kind of made romance more accessible for people. I've had a few like specific patrons come into the library and be like, hey, I'm getting back into the reading for the first time in so long. I'm looking for the romance section. And I think Book Talk has done a really great job at making romance books like accessible and appealing to people who are maybe trying to get out of a reading slump or who haven't been avid readers for a really long time. So I definitely like understand the good things that it does for reading. I just like personally don't always find it to be like what I am looking for. I tend to lean more towards the like darker and heavier like literary fiction stuff. I did read a lot more romance in high school, but it was kind of like really poorly written heterosexual romance that like looking back on it, I'm like, no, that wasn't for me. Like it was fun to read at the time, but in hindsight, it's not the kind of thing that I would return to. But I think like where I am right now in this moment, I've been reading so many like really, really dark and depressing things that haven't necessarily been like what I've wanted in this moment in my life. So reading like a super fun and goofy and campy romance book for this week in particular, like this really did it for me. I maybe converted back towards reading more romance books after the experience that I had this week. I did read like a kind of pulp Harlequin, like sapphic romance that was super, super fun. So, Corene, you may be converting me slowly but surely back into the romance genre. And I do agree that it can open up really good opportunities for conversations about race. And like in my book in particular, conversations about gender identity. So that's really cool. That's a really cool thing that romance can do. So no, not a normal romance reader, but I do respect it. I do understand the things that it does and like the good that it can do for people who are trying to get back into reading. So I'm not a romance hater. I am maybe a romance convert.
Excellent. Well, I feel like I probably sit somewhere in the middle between you guys. I think that for a lot of years, I denied the fact that I enjoyed a romance novel, as I'm sure a lot of people have done. I think Corene mentions it kind of got a bad rap. I think that for a long time, it did not have a great reputation for whatever reason, not necessarily warranted. But I think that because of that, I would kind of deny the fact that I did enjoy a romance book. I would always read books that had a romance in them, and I would really enjoy that aspect of it, but I would never admit to the fact that I actually enjoyed a romance book. And I'm done with that. I can very proudly and confidently say that I do enjoy a good romance book. I'm a big romantasy fan, whether or not I like the term or not. I absolutely love romance in my fantasy books, vice versa. So yeah, I would definitely say I'm maybe not quite as well versed in romance as Corene is, I think, but that's not to say that I don't really, really enjoy a good romance book as well.
You really kind of mentioned something, Sadie, is like the shame, the long period of shame associated with reading romance, is that it was seen as such like an illicit behavior, like sad, pathetic to be reading romance novels as if it's some sort of like female fulfillment fantasy. And in some ways it is, but no one's denigrating Westerns for being like stereotypical masculine wish fulfillment. Like, I think because it was, primarily marketed towards women for a long time, there is that kind of like misogyny baked in to the denigration of that particular genre in the way that it hasn't applied to other genres.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. I think that, for so long that people would kind of sneak into the romance aisle and sneak their book out and hope that no one would see that that's what they're reading, or the famous put another book in front of your book as you're reading it in public transit, so that no one can actually see kind of what you're reading. But I'm glad to say that I think that is definitely changing, and as both you kind of said, people are kind of seeing what they can do with the genre, and I think that that's bringing more people to the genre and kind of opening that up a little bit more for people. Excellent. All right. Well, we are going to talk about some books today. We might be talking about a few different romance books today, but I think that we're going to start with Emma. And I know, Emma, you did read a, as you were saying, kind of a campy sapphic romance. So I'm very excited to hear about what book you read for this week.
It was definitely campy, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said before, I don't really read like romance. I don't really read within the romance genre, but I do, like Sadie said, I do enjoy a book with a little bit of romance peppered in, especially if it's just like, this is a realistic relationship between two people that happens to exist within the plot of the story. I do enjoy books like that. But the book that I read for this week is definitely just a typical romance. Because I don't really read romance, but my partner does, I had Kate pick out my book for this week. And it was just like, it was so fun. It was so ridiculous. It was a campy, silly little romp. It was extremely cheesy at a lot of times, but nonetheless, I had a lot of fun with it. So this one was a Regency romance that was filled with deceptions and disguises and a lot of sapphic pining. So, like I said, very silly, but also very fun. So we have our character, Philippa York. She is one of the cleverest young women in London high society. She meets with her reading circle of fellow blue-stocking women once a week, where they discuss the latest books, the latest current events, philanthropic endeavors that they're doing, and other things that Philippa's mother has deemed unbecoming of young ladies of the ton. Philippa has at this point been out in society for 5 years now and has yet to secure herself a husband, much to the dismay of her parents. And while Philippa was more than happy remaining a spinster with her books and her female friends to keep her company, her marriage prospects not only affected her own reputation, but also the reputations of her parents. She has her father's political career and her mother's social status that are both kind of riding on her ability to marry a man of high standing, and so she has that to worry about. But at this point, Philippa relishes in every moment that she has with her reading circle and with her freedom, lest it be taken away from her by her mother. However, tragedy has struck her reading circle. One of her fellow bluestockings, an amateur cryptographer named Damaris, has invented a cipher that's used to send coded messages. The cipher was then stolen by Damaris's uncle, Captain Northrop, to be used by the military. And when Northrop stole the cipher, he claimed all credit for inventing it. And now he's being awarded by the Prince Regent with a viscountcy. That's one of those words that I've never had to say out loud. Viscountcy. But he's becoming a viscount. That's his prize for inventing this cipher. So Damaris rightfully feels betrayed. She feels belittled. And Philippa, with the support of the rest of the reading circle, vows to uncover proof of Northrop's theft and stop him from being rewarded for the efforts of intelligent women. Thankfully for her, one of the reading circle's members, named Chloe Winchester, is just the woman that they need to get the job done. Chloe and her family, the Winchesters, are an adoptive family that are headed by the late Baron Vanderveen. Bean plucked the Winchester children from the streets or from orphanages, where he provided them with a home where they could be authentically themselves and away from society's prying eyes and judgment. And each of the Winchester siblings has their own unique specialty that they use too. And this is where it's pretty heavy-handed on the cheese. They have their specialties that they use to do the impossible and seek injustice for those with no other recourse. It's quite like do good tutors, superheroes. Yeah. Anyway, a bit of suspending disbelief has to happen to kind of get into the story. But with the Winchesters at their side, Philippa has no doubt that the Blue Stocking Reading Circle can expose Northrop for the fraud that he is. So Chloe takes the news of Northrop's lies back to the Winchester home, where the siblings begin planning their next mission to prove the cipher is Damaris's and prevent Northrop from receiving his undeserved rewards. So now back at the Winchester house, we meet the rest of the eccentric Winchester siblings, which include Graham, a master of intelligence and espionage who plays the role of information gatherer, while also leaping from rooftop to infiltrate society circles. So pretty cheesy. We've got Jacob, who houses a zoo of unique animals that are all trained in their own special skill sets. We'll enter a scene and Jacob is like under the couch trying to search for a scorpion that like carries secret messages, or there's a homing kitten that's trained to always go home. It's a little bit ridiculous. He, like, I kid you not, has a zoo. And then we have Elizabeth, who conceals a sword stick inside of her cane and is ready for a fight at moment's notice. And finally, we have Tommy, who's a master of disguises. Tommy was actually present at Philippa's reading circle, not quite as herself, but at Chloe's side, disguised as Great Aunt Winchester. And it's only while she's disguised that Tommy can bring herself to speak to Philippa, because she is smitten. She's so far gone. She's so smitten with Philippa. And ever since the previous year's end of season gala, Tommy's been too embarrassed to ever try to speak to Philippa as herself. So the only way she can do it is when she's disguised. The other Winchesters tease her endlessly for this, but since the Winchesters, including Tommy, must now use their skills to help Philippa, Tommy must get over her fears and finally speak to her unrequited crush. The only way she can do that, though, is if she does it not as herself, but in disguise. So this time, Tommy chooses her form to be the young Baron Vanderbean, who's the fictional heir to the late Baron Vanderbean's titles and fortune. Since the Baron did not have an official heir, a fake Baron Vanderbean was created to allow the Winchesters access to his fortune without the heir having to actually appear in society. But Tommy now attends society events as a man, as the young Baron Vanderbean, and this gives her opportunity to officially speak to Philippa, not as herself, but as a potential suitor for Philippa's hand. This all delights Philippa's mother, although she wouldn't be satisfied with Philippa marrying someone with as low of a title as Baron. At least this makes Philippa appear more desirable to other suitors. Baron Vanderbean's interest in Philippa ups her popularity, so other suitors are now more interested in her as well. So this ruse works for everybody. Tommy gets to spend time with Philippa. Philippa's mother is delighted by Philippa's newfound popularity. And Philippa starts to gradually feel more affectionate towards her new suitor, and even more so when she learns that her suitor is, in fact, a woman. So Philippa's never felt like, in her words, like her cold, dead heart could ever fall for a man. And she hates that she needs a man to help her complete this mission. So she's delighted to learn that Tommy is not a man. Tommy is, in fact, a woman. And Philippa revels in Tommy's freedom to live her life and present herself as she pleases, something that Philippa never felt like she could have. So while Tommy has long harbored feelings for Philippa, Philippa's own feelings kind of gradually grow throughout the book, especially since she feels stifled by her parents' expectations. She doesn't quite fall for Tommy immediately. She doesn't feel like she can truly be herself or allow herself to love who she truly loves. To her, being a spinster and being in a relationship with a woman were never really options. So she envies the freedom that Tommy and her siblings have to live their lives as they please. And she finds that all she wants in life is to be like the Winchesters, or to be one of the Winchesters, and to be accepted and respected for who she really is. So this book is called The Perks of Loving a Wallflower by Erica Ridley. The cover is quite deceiving because it looks like it's two femmes when Tommy is like a gender-bending kind of non-binary-ish character. And Philippa is supposed to be quite like curvy and a bit bigger. And so this is a super misleading cover. Don't let the cover deceive you. It is not two femmes. It's actually one femme and a non-binary character. But this book is the second in a series called The Wild Winchesters. I never read the first book in the series, and I definitely do not think you need to be able to kind of get into this book and understand this book. So each of the books in the series is about a different Winchester sibling. It's kind of similar to Bridgerton in that way. The first one is about Chloe and her love story with the Duke of Faircliff, who in this book is now her husband. And this one, as far as I know, is the only queer romance in the series, but it's also, I don't think all of the books have been written yet. We could have some more queer Winchesters in the future, but at this point, this is the only queer one. I really, really enjoyed it. The book is so silly. Was it historically accurate? Absolutely not. Did I want it to be? Also, no. I wanted the lesbians to be together at the end, which I feel like doesn't really happen in like historically accurate Regency period literature. So I'm glad that my lesbians were able to find happiness. That was what I was looking for. This book was a romp. It was more about the sapphic pining than the actual like cipher mission at the core, which I think was done really well. A lot of the stuff with like the cipher and the kind of like sneaking into buildings and doing the espionage, all that was like quite cheesy in my opinion, but a lot of it was done off page. Like they ended up sneaking, some of the Winchester siblings snuck into a library at Cambridge to steal like a heavily guarded illuminated manuscript. And they were like, yeah, it was easy. We just like brought in Jacob's Zoo of Animals. And I was like, what? But because that wasn't the main point of it, the main point of it was the romance. I was like, yeah, whatever. Who cares about the cipher? I want to see the pining. I want to see like these two characters getting in a dance at a ball and like feeling like they can't touch each other. Like that's what I'm here for. So I really enjoyed it, even though it was quite cheesy. It was very like, we help the helpless. That's what Winchesters do. But if you can get over that, then I think you'll have a lot of fun with this one. It was romantic. It was hopeful. Some of the characters, especially the Winchester siblings, were a little bit caricature-y. Like Graham, the one who leaps from rooftop to rooftop, was a former member of the circus. So, of course, he backflips out of rooms after conversations. Like, duh. And like I said before with the Cambridge Library, like, of course, they can sneak in without detection. So a lot of suspending disbelief is necessary to buy into the whole like cipher uncovering Northrop's treachery part of the story. But if you're able to do that, then I think you can have a lot of fun with it. And while some of the characters were really corny, others I think were really enjoyable and quite relatable and realistic. And I think the book did a good job of portraying characters with disability in particular. Two of the Winchester siblings are disabled, but that doesn't stop either of them from taking part in any of the action. Elizabeth, who uses a sword stick, actually conceals her stick inside of a cane and she deals with chronic pain. So that was pretty cool. And then there's another Winchester sibling named Marjorie, who is an excellent drawer and illustrator, but she's also hard of hearing. And there was a really good scene where Tommy explains to Philippa for the first time that Marjorie is hard of hearing, where Philippa asks, like, should I speak louder? Should I speak slower in front of her? And Tommy's like, no, just make sure you make eye contact and she'll understand you just fine. And I think it's those little moments that were done really, really well, where the disability is used kind of to strengthen the characters without it becoming the entirety of what that character is about. So I really enjoyed those like little details in it. I think the author does a really good job of showing all of the different kind of conflicted feelings that are going on within Philippa and within Tommy throughout their relationship. Philippa obviously has these conflicted feelings of like, it is my duty to marry a lord. It's my duty to marry a viscount for my family, for my father and whatnot. So she doesn't feel like her attraction to Tommy is something she can ever act upon. While Tommy also has a lot of her own conflicted feelings, where she's worried that Tommy is falling for the man, Baron Vanderbean, and not Tommy for who she really is. So there's interesting kind of conversations about gender that are going on that I really enjoyed, especially like within a very silly, kind of ridiculous Regency book. It was nice to get those bits as well. As someone who's constantly shifting through different disguises, Tommy struggles a lot with who she really is, how others really perceive her, which I think made her a really realistic and complex character. So overall, I had a lot of fun with this book. I thought it was quite well written. I thought the romance was really well done. The sapphic pining was exactly what I was looking for. And it was filled with a lot of silly and likable characters, maybe some not so believable characters, but still likable nonetheless. So if you're looking for something that's really goofy or really campy, maybe a bit of a Bridgerton Rita-like, but a little bit more ridiculous, or if you enjoy Regency romance, or if you want to see more lesbians in your Regency romance, then I recommend you read The Perks of Loving a Wallflower by Erica Ridley.
That honestly sounds like a lot of fun, and I think I would enjoy that quite a bit. I feel like that is a really good example of kind of how the genre is being taken and changed and kind of made to include to be more inclusive, which is wonderful. Now, before we move on to our next book, I have another question for my book friends. Now, Corene, you had alluded to the fact that you do not enjoy all aspects of romance books. And so I'm curious for my book friends, what are the aspects or what are the styles or the tropes or the types of romance books that you actually do not like and you will not read?
Just bringing up the list of romance tropes to go through them, and then we can all just weigh in. Definitely one that I've talked about on this podcast before, amnesia. I don't care for amnesia. I just think like someone's undergoing this horrible, traumatic, like injury to their brain. Now is not the time for love. Any objections? Nope, we're all there. Desperate to note on the list, amnesia wasn't number one, but enemies to lovers. How do people feel about this? Sadie?
You know, I don't mind actually an enemies to lovers one. I like to kind of have like that banter going back and forth and maybe not like pure enemies. I sometimes struggle. I just read a book that wasn't technically a romance, but that kind of had like two people who were very like drastically opposed to one another's beliefs and ideas. And like to the point where she was a witch, he was a witch hunter, and he literally wanted to kill her. And then they were like having this romance on the side where they didn't realize that the other and so like that enemy, so like it just went a bit too far where I couldn't quite like see how you would get from hating each other so much to the point of wanting to kill the other person and like in a very serious way, like to loving someone. So I think that a light enemies to lovers or like a rivals to lovers or that kind of thing, like I can deal with, but like a straight like very distinct enemies to lovers, I do struggle with that one. Emma, what do you think?
So I definitely haven't minded it in the past, but I feel like the times when I like really buy into the enemies to lovers is when like they initially think that they disagree, like they think they have different values, but once they realize that they're actually on the same page, then they can grow together. Like the one that I read that was not a fantasy, but I read it for the historical fantasy, A Crane Among Wolves. It had two characters like that, where like they initially thought that they were enemies, but then the woman was like, oh, I guess we actually do have more in common. I guess you actually are on my side in this conflict. And so they're able to grow together. And that I buy into. Like, I love the tension that can be built within enemies to lovers. This is not a romance. This is not a canonical romance, but like my high Q characters that I ship together, they're definitely enemies. Are they also lovers? Absolutely. Or like I really enjoyed Red, White, and Royal Blue. That I thought that book was super silly and fun. So like I don't read as much romance as you two, so I don't have as much to pull from for this, but I do not mind an enemies to lovers. I feel like I had a trope that I really disliked. Oh, I don't like the Beauty and the Beast trope. I don't like the Stockholm syndrome trope. I'm over it. I'm sick of it. The whole like falling in love with your captor. I don't want to read any more of those.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like captor and or, someone who actively was trying to murder you. That's a hard like barrier to get over. I will say it's not my favorite because it's such a like fine line to toe, because if they're two enemies-ish, you end up kind of really hating the other character because they're acting like a dick. And you're like, well, why? You're not a nice person. So I don't actually want my main character to fall in love with you because you're mean. You're really, really mean. And one of the books that I was going to talk about, I do remember reading it being like, there's no need for you to be that gruff with a sheep. Like, you could just, you don't even need to say a kind word. You could just say a neutral word. But yeah, I feel like a lot of enemies to lovers is like based on the trope of miscommunication, which I do not care for at all. Just like have an adult conversation once in your lives. But yes, it's not my favorite trope, I will say, because I do find like to really create a lot of tension in someone's, the authors kind of swing really hard over to making one of the characters act like a jerk. Childhood sweethearts.
I think it's boring. Dare I say? I need more tension.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know if I have any strong feelings one way or another, to be honest with you. I don't, maybe that's because I can't think of one that I have read with that trope. So I don't know. I'm going to say I'm neutral.
I love a good, like, when they were younger, one of them was deeply enamored with the other and then never did anything about it. If you were kind of like making out in high school and then you've continued to make out further on, I don't find that as interesting. But something like the manga, I'm not going to pronounce this right, Wotakoi, that I found really sweet, that they like really admired each other with children, then they reconnect when they're older. That I'm good with. On that same kind of note, friends to lovers as the trope. Sadie, what do you think?
I don't mind a good friends to lovers. I kind of like the idea, like, we've been friends for so long. You've been the one person that I can depend on. What I don't like about it is there's usually like it's usually part of a love triangle. I find like the friends to lovers is often like there's another person who one of the characters is actually dating or actually in love with, and then like you have that kind of tension between that. And I find that it's the friend of whatever the person is always painted as just being like the nice one, the good one, the safe choice. And then it kind of like almost seems like they settle in a way. Like they do have that realization, it was you all along, and that's great. But like it doesn't have as much of the kind of power as another kind of romance does. And maybe that's why it's not, yeah.
I've enjoyed friends to lovers in like romance manga. Like I loved Fruits Basket, like the Toru Kyo love story. Like nothing will ever be better than the Toru Kyo love story. Or right now, because the Kimi ni Todoke new season was just dropped on Netflix, so I've been watching that. And like that love story is just so beautiful and wholesome. I also would find it hypocritical to say I didn't like friends to lovers because that's what happened in my real life. But yeah, I think it's cute. I think it can be fun when it works out.
I love that you're like, well, we're cute, so like, so it's perfect.
I mean, it worked out for me. It worked out for Toru and Kyo, so
there you go. I love a friends to lovers. I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Sadie. Though, is that oftentimes like I hate a love triangle. I hate it. You have two hands. Just like take an air and a spare. It's fine. Like I don't. I really dislike love triangles. I think it's also extremely like unrealistic in some ways, which is a weird thing to say about romance, but it's just like your heart wants what your heart wants. So just be honest with people and don't. And again, like who has time for that? Who has time? Speaking of time, fake relationships. I love this. I love this so much. I think it's the stupidest concept to apply to the real world, but in like the heightened world of anything else, I'm so in. I'm so in. Sadie?
Yeah, I can definitely get behind like a fake dating, fake relationship, even just like a be my date for the night kind of thing. And then you realize that there's more feelings or all the way to the let's pretend that we're engaged so that like my parents will get off my back. And yeah, no, I do. I enjoy a good fake dating one. What do you think, Emma?
I don't know if I've ever properly read a full fake dating relationship. I started one, but it was a Christmas book and I couldn't finish it before Christmas, so I put it down. It was Kiss Her Once from Me, if you guys are familiar. And I was like you said, like this could absolutely never happen in the real world, and I don't buy into it, and I just can't. But like maybe if I committed to reading the entirety of the book, I could have fun with it. But I don't know if I've ever actually read a full fake relationship story, so I haven't seen it to fruition before. So I don't know if I can have an opinion on this one unless I properly read one. I'm going to stay neutral.
Very wise, very wise. I feel like it's more of like a fan fiction thing than it is in a lot of romance, except for like The Proposal, of course, the great Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds film. Yeah, and I think Helen Huang's book, The Kiss Quotient, had that. And my goodness, did she do some heavy lifting to make that work? And it did work. It worked so well. But my goodness, did she have to like do some like loop-de-loop 3-ring circuses to kind of like make that function? All right. Soulmates.
Hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Absolutely hate it. I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast. This is a very common one in like fantasy or like fae books about the fae, because it's like the mate, right? And in their world, you get your mate and that's who your mate is. And I absolutely cannot stand it. Make your own choices. Make your own choices and don't let this weird fate or destiny decide for you who you should love. Just make your own damn choices.
All I can think of right now is the werewolf imprinting, and I'm just like, nope, 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 nope. Imprinting on children, nope.
Well, that's often what it is, right? Like you often have like this person who is like 100 years older than another person, but it's often they have this realization that they are this person's mate when this other person is a child, and it's just wrong. It's just wrong.
I don't mind it. Like depends on the context. I don't love anyone falling in love with children for obvious reasons. But if it's I don't know, like if they're doing something with it. Again, that Ali Hazelwood book broke my brain. I could not believe that I was seeing things from like AO3 printed on paper pages. So yeah, whatever. Sure. Why not? Second chances.
I'll allow it because that's pretty realistic. Like sometimes somebody messes up and then you come back together after they've redeemed. I love a redemption arc. So if the second chance includes a good redemption arc in the middle, then I'm into it. But like I named my cat Prince Zuko, so you guys all knew this about me.
I feel like it depends on what happened to end the relationship the first time and how much of a jerk one of the people ends up being, because I feel like I just remember back, I think it was Corene, I don't remember if it was last week or the one before, where the book about the woman who gets kicked out of like I hesitate to use the word cult, but she gets like because she had sex with this other guy, and I think about that, and that like is like a second chance story, and I'm like, no, like why would you want to go back with someone? And so I think that it depends for me a lot on how the relationship ended. If it was more of like it just didn't work out at a time, like something happened that caused one person had to move, or like one person had to like make a choice that was really difficult and they chose something else. And now they're coming back and they're realizing that they still have feelings for this person. That I am okay with, that I'm fine. But it really does depend on how much of a dick the other person was to break up the relationship in the first point.
I'm a hard pass. I think you broke up the first time for a reason. I do believe in like a redemptive arc. But again, Prince Zuko, as far as we know, wasn't romantically involved with anyone on the team. He just like horribly betrayed them to, Azula. So yeah, it wasn't, so it's like, for me, it's a different story. I do love like, you can redeem yourself through acts in the eyes of, the people that love you. But like, as for romance, I'm like, you definitely broke up for a reason. So maybe like examine that. Yes. I'm trying to think of like, there's one exception to that. Oh, but it's not coming to mind, unfortunately. But again, Sadie, you're absolutely right. It depends on the reason as to why you broke up. At any time, it's like, we got divorced and then 5 years ago, we're back together again. I'm like, You're going back to that one restaurant that gave you food poisoning and you spent 24 hours hating your insides and you're going back for seconds. You know how this is going to end. But anyhow, and our very kind of like last but not least on the list that I have in front of me, forced proximity, or egads. There's only one bed.
I enjoy a good forced proximity. I do. The book that I did end up kind of reading for this week is big on the forced proximity, and I mean I like it. It's kind of that like, I don't know, that fun idea that yeah, you can't leave, but you realize that maybe you don't want to. Maybe you don't want to, and it's okay that we're stuck at this cabin and there's a snowstorm outside, and I don't know. I think it's a fun one. I think that it's a fun one, or that can be very, very fun.
I liked it in the Song of Achilles, so I feel like I can't hate on it. But I also think that might be the only proper example that I have. I can't think of any other. Because like at some points I could see it being really cheesy, but like I loved it in the Song of Achilles, so I can't hate on it now.
It just makes me really concerned about the hospitality industry, that they are like constantly unable to like figure out their booking system so that people get the amount of bed/rooms that they're asking for. Like what is wrong with hotels.com that, they're coming up against this error so many times. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And I think it's kind of, it is funny because it's like narratively there can be no other people in this world. Like you've got this one option and you might as well take it. You're trapped in a storm with this one person. Like you might as well make out. Yes, I forgot one. I forgot one very important trope. Since this is an exhaustive list that we're forcing Virginia to listen to because she does the editing for this podcast, forbidden romance.
As a queer person, I don't mind it. But like that was kind of the point of my book. It's like these two were not supposed to be together, but they made it happen. So
yeah, I think for me it depends on how it ends. I don't do well with tragedy. Like if it's a Romeo and Juliet style forbidden romance that just ends with both of them dying, I struggle with that a little bit. I want to see a forbidden romance that, like Emma's, it works out in the end. Like they figure it out and they are able to change the mind of the people who are forbidding them to have a romance, or they kind of are able to, even to the point of like they're able to leave that negative situation and go off and kind of create a life for themselves. Then I'm okay with it. But the one that just ends in everybody dying or not getting, and like nobody getting what they want and what they need, then that I don't really enjoy.
Is it okay? Am I mistaking the plot of the musical The Fantastics in that the parents want their kids to get together, so they're like, you can never be, and so they kind of create or engineer this entire scenario? Am I remembering that correctly? It's been a while.
I don't actually know The Fantastics. This is a horrible thing for me to say as a musical theater person, but I'm not actually convinced, but I am just reading it. And it says, yes, concerning two neighboring fathers who trick their children into falling in love. So yeah, it does sound like that is exactly what is happening.
Yeah. So yeah, I also love a forbidden romance. I love the trope of like one rich character and one poor character. And at some point, the rich character's mom goes over to the like poor love interest and is like, look, you need to leave my son/daughter alone. And here's the amount of money that I'm willing for you to just walk away from that. And these stupid like heroes and our heroines are always like, no, you could never force me to like unlove them. And I'd be like, take the stupid money and make out in secret later. Like, what are you thinking? This is not a legally binding contract. There's no paper trail. What legal recourse would they have if you just cash that check and then continue to make out with them? Ridiculous. Yeah, I like it. I like it, especially because like it's usually like there's some like tension within a society or there's tension within ideals. And again, the characters are there to kind of like breach that divide between those two things and show them that there is another better secret third way of just like being chill. And so love that. So yeah, sorry, that's the exhaustive list that I found, Sadie.
I found one more, and this kind of touches on what you just mentioned. Secret identity / billionaire / royalty. Oh. What do people think about that one?
I love it. I love it so much. I love it. 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 And weirdly, I think it has to do with all like the weird, like psychological tropes of why romance is so fulfilling. It's like, this is wish fulfillment. You get the person that you want and also financial security. And just saying, there is nothing more attractive than that. That is a full-time, guaranteed, secure job with benefits and probably massively good insurance. So yeah, I love it. I love it so much. Give me 1,000,000 of them.
I don't think I've ever read one, so I can't weigh in, but I'll just agree with Corene because it sounds wonderful.
I also don't know if I've read one, but I am like that trope in like a good Christmas Hallmark movie. I do quite like. So I would say that I could probably get behind it in a book as well.
It's like a very big like K-drama trope or other, like I see it a lot in TV. And I'm like, it's usually like the poor, like, but good-hearted girl and like the rich billionaire CEO. And it's just like, do you have no curiosity about like what is going on in his life? Because there are clues. Like there are so many clues and you are picking up on none of it. So it is hard to do correctly because you end up usually thinking that the heroine is an absolute dip because come on, he has 15 cars and a driver. Like that's not a normal person thing that we do. It's not a normal thing to do. But yeah, that's a really good one, Sadie.
There's always clues. There's always clues. All right. Well, I apologize to Virginia for having to listen to that list of tropes there, but that was a lot of fun. And I feel like now I'm going to go in search of some of those. I feel like I want to explore that list a little bit more and see how I actually feel about some of the ones that I have not read as much.
The next 12 episodes of Keep It Fictional are each based on a different romance trope. And because Virginia's not here, we voted on it and said yes.
She does control the spreadsheet, though, so
we have editing access. We can edit that thing.
That's true. That's true. All right. Well, I am going to talk about one of the books that I read for this week. I actually read a few different books for this week because I wasn't sure what kind of book I actually wanted. So I read a couple of kind of cozy fantasy romance. One I really enjoyed, but then realized that Virginia has already talked about it, weirdly enough. Yeah, I know. So it was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, I think it's called. And it is by Sangu Mandana, and Virginia read it for books with your favorite trope in it. And so I don't know if it was the Found Family. I'm trying to remember this one. So it may have been the Found Family, but I don't honestly remember how she felt about it. I loved it. I thought it was wonderful, and it kind of had how is it talked about? It said it was a mix of something and House in the Cerulean Sea. And so I'm guessing that that's what drew Virginia to it, because I know we're both big fans of TJ Klune and A House in the Cerulean Sea, and it definitely had that vibe to it for sure. But I am curious. I would like to talk to Virginia when she is back and kind of see what her thoughts on that were. So that one was wonderful.
She hated it. She hated it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I imagine. I know she gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, or 3 stars? I think she had 3 stars on Goodreads. So I'm like, it could go either direction. But yeah, I'm sure she hated it. But it was a very sweet, kind of cozy romance set in England. And it kind of had that what is the term when you like grumpy sunshine kind of like that trope? So you have like, the really grumpy guy and the really like upbeat, happy.
Yes.
Which I do enjoy a good grumpy sunshine. It's akin to like the Lorelai Gilmore, Luke Danes kind of connection, which so anyways. So yes, if anyone is interested in like a nice, cozy fantasy romance, I would recommend that one. But the other one I read was actually one that was on my list of most anticipated books for the May to August. And it is by my diehard author, Kelley Armstrong. And this is Kelley Armstrong's first legitimate romance book. She has written pretty much everything. She's written thriller, she's written mystery, she's written straight fantasy, she's written urban fantasy, she's written YA, she's written kids, she's written fantasy. I would say romantasy, even though I don't think it was called that. So yeah, she's always written like time travel historical stuff, which is okay. But she has never tackled straight on romance. And so this is her first real romance novel, and it is called Finding Mr. Right. Hence the pun. Yeah. And it is one thing I just want to start by saying is that Kelley Armstrong is very good at playing into the tropes. Like she is very good at kind of knowing what the tropes are and writing to the tropes. And so I think that is one thing that she did really, really well in this book. And there were some things that she did not quite as well in this book as well. But I will tell you what it is about. So this book follows Daphne McFadden. And Daphne is an architect turned writer. And she has written a great book. She knows that she has. Or at least she's pretty sure that she has. Now, some people might say that the zombie craze is over. But the story that Daphne has written is new and original. It's for a YA reader. It has a strong female protagonist who is just making her way and surviving in this kind of post-apocalyptic world in Canada's north. The setting itself is very familiar to Daphne, and she's written her main character using her own experiences from living almost off the grid in the Yukon. She's really very sure that her book is good, she thinks. The kind of book that she would have liked as a teenager, written by a female author like the ones that she looked up to. There's just one problem. No one wants to publish her book. She sent out the manuscript to dozens of publishers, and she hasn't heard a single thing. So one night, in a slightly tipsy, desperation-inspired decision, Daphne submits her book as Zane Remington, confident, burly outdoorsman from the Canadian Yukon. And surprisingly, it works. Or unsurprisingly. Her book is almost immediately picked up. And within days, she's looking at $500,000 book deal. Great, right? Women write under male pseudonyms all the time. She's proved her point that male authors get accepted far more readily than female ones, even with the exact same book. So now she can come clean with the publisher and promote the book as herself. Except she doesn't really want to promote the book as herself. She wants it to be successful, of course, but Daphne hates being in the spotlight. She hates being the center of attention. She would rather write in her peaceful Yukon home with her dog next to her and not have to deal with all of the interviews and the publicity and the photo shoots. So maybe she can hide behind Zane Remington for just a little bit longer. So when her agent and publisher asks her to send in some author photos, she turns to her best friend, Nia, for help. Nia is a lawyer, and she's quite knowledgeable. And the solution that Nia comes up with is easy. They'll hire an actor to play Zane. When Daphne first meets Chris Ainsworth, she knows that he is perfect. Not in like a real way. The guy honestly seems kind of like a dick. He's overly confident and cocky. However, he encompasses the Zane Remington persona perfectly. And with a resume to match the outdoor-loving, firewood-chopping, grizzly bear-experienced man who Daphne said Zane was, it's perfect. All Chris has to do is take a few publicity shots, maybe do a couple of phone interviews, and everything will be fine, especially for a professional actor like Chris Ainsworth. Chris Stanton is not an actor. Sure, he acted a bit in high school, but he was always more of the math geek than anything else. Now he's an accountant, and a good one. But when his business partner starts skimming money off the company accounts to feed his cocaine habit, Chris finds himself in big trouble. So he makes a deal with a lawyer that he's done taxes for before, Nia. If he helps her, she'll get him out of this big mess. Her best friend is looking for an actor who can play the role of her male pseudonym, Zane Remington. While Chris does not in any way encompass the burly outdoorsman that Zane is advertised to be, he doesn't really have much of a choice. So he takes the job. This starts a back and forth between Daphne and Chris, first as employer and employee, as they're trying to figure out how Chris can act as Zane Remington. However, when her book is released and becomes far more popular than Daphne ever imagined, and there's a TV show that wants to do a segment, Daphne and Chris are forced together on Daphne's Yukon home. Things kind of take a turn for the worse when Chris is comes face to face with a grizzly bear and has no idea what to do. After this experience, the truth finally comes out. Chris is not an actor. Chris is not an outdoorsman. Chris has no knowledge of any of the things that Daphne or Zane Remington does. And now Daphne and Chris have to figure out what to do. So this takes them on a journey of going on a book tour. As their romance starts to bloom, they start to realize, as Daphne starts to realize, that Chris Stanton, not Chris Ainsworth, but Chris Stanton might actually be a pretty good guy. And the feelings that she's having for him and the very obvious attraction to this absolutely gorgeous man does not hurt. She finds it hard to kind of know what to do. So as I said, Kelley Armstrong does very well with playing into the tropes. She creates a very kind of stereotypical romantic comedy kind of story. You have the forced proximity. They're stuck at this house in the Yukon. They're trying to keep this secret from a film crew who thinks that Chris is the actual writer of this book. They're trying to promote her book at the same time. Chris is kind of, once he comes clean, it kind of becomes a much better story, I think. He secretly has read her book, but refuses to tell her about it because he thinks that Chris Ainsworth wouldn't have read that kind of book. And kind of, she starts to learn who he actually is as a person. And he's a pretty good guy. But then it also kind of has this other side of things where Daphne's trying to figure out what to do. Is she going to tell the world that she is, in fact, Zane Remington? She starts to realize that all of the female authors that she looked up to as a teenager, she's kind of letting down all of these other kids who might look up to her in the same way. And so she's kind of struggling with this big choice. As you can probably guess, there is lots of good romance between Daphne and Chris as they get to know each other more. And then there's also kind of the misunderstandings, which I think romantic comedies are famous for. You always have that kind of one person says something, one person does something that is completely misunderstood by somebody, the other person, and now they're in this big battle. For quite a while, it took me, I was very curious as to how that was going to come out, because you kind of know that is what's going to be the issue. One of them is going to do something and the other one is going to disagree. And for much of the story, they're very much on the same page. And so they did kind of get there, but I don't know if it was done perfectly. One thing that I will say about Kelley Armstrong's books, so this is something that has changed. And I think that she's made a very conscious and deliberate choice to make all of her characters extremely politically correct. And I don't think this is always a bad thing. I think that the decision to do this was very smart. I think that she will often address the sexism and that side of things and misogyny. And that is great. And I really appreciate kind of not having her characters be complete and total jerks. But I think that she pushes it a little bit too far. All of the men are always very much I understand exactly what you're going through. And I think that I understand as a woman that this is what you're dealing with and this is what you're going through. And I feel like it's not entirely realistic all the time. And so I think that this book also did have quite a bit of that in it, where Chris he's very understanding. He's extremely understanding. And he kind of comes off as being like the perfect guy until he kind of makes that one mistake. And even in that, he kind of sits there and he realized, like, no, what I did was wrong. What I did was the wrong thing to do for this woman who is trying to make her way in this world that is dominated by men. And I think that, I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but I think that the idea behind what she's doing is really great. And I appreciate that she puts that into the books, but it just comes across as being very, I don't know the right word for it, but just like very like, this is how it should be. This is how it's supposed to be. And so this is how I'm going to write these characters. So I would say that is definitely my one kind of criticism towards this book. But all in all, it's a really fun book. You're definitely like, you're rooting for both of them. It splits perspectives between Chris and Daphne. And so you kind of get both of their perspectives. And I actually really enjoyed reading the Chris perspectives, because he's kind of like just this kind of dorky math guy who during his first season as an accountant got really, really stressed and started working out. And so he's also just like completely just like super buff and super in shape. And yeah. And so his character is great. He loves to bake. Like his big thing is that he absolutely loves to bake. And so he bakes her brownies and disguises the fact that he made them. And so, yeah, so like he's definitely created to be like this perfect, this perfect kind of person. But it had a lot of fun stuff. It had a lot of kind of those typical romantic comedy. I could see this being done as a movie really, really easily. Maybe that was the plan. I feel like a lot of authors write these days because they know that things are very easily adapted to TV and to movies. And so this is one that I definitely saw very, very easily being adapted just into like a romantic comedy. And I would watch it. I would 100% watch it. And if I had the time, I would probably watch it again. I would definitely watch it more than once, because it's sweet and it's cute. And it's just one of those feel good stories that everything is, you just know it's going to turn out. Even with the issues, you just know that it's going to turn out. So that is my book. The one that I ended up reading is Finding Mr. Right by Kelley Armstrong. All right. I was going to try and think of one more romance question that I could ask my book friends before we move on to our final book. But I'm drawing a blank. So we might move on to Corene and see which book or books she is going to bring for us today. And then I will think of a question for us to end off with. All right, Corene, which ones did you bring for us today?
Oh, this was a nightmare. Oh, hated this so much. Yeah, this isn't because the theme is just romance, just all the romance, every single romance that is ever romanced. And so to choose one is like frankly impossible. So I decided to kind of go with maybe an author that I enjoy, that I think is doing some really cool and interesting things, rather than like just highlight a particular book, because there's just so many to talk about that I have to limit myself, because we need this room in like 20 minutes. So like, we got to keep this short and sweet. And honestly, like describing this book, there's not a ton of detail that I really need to go into. I think my book talk will be quite short, because it is a beautiful Avon romance book. And like, you can just like wallow in like a well done, delightful workplace romance, I guess is what I'm going to call it, which I always think is a terrible idea. But in fiction, it's fine. And it's kind of like not an atypical workplace to start with. So the author that I really wanted to highlight today is Alyssa Cole. She's a Black romance writer who has written kind of like the Civil War romances, or romances set in the Civil War, not about the romance of the Civil War. And she did the series, one of the books that I'm going to talk about, which is The Reluctant Royals, in which she kind of does different characters. One of them is like a queer romance. One of them is like this one that I'm going to talk about. The other one that I'm totally blanking on. But I just think what she does is really cool. She has recently started getting into writing kind of like suspense thrillers, which I think is really neat. So she's got range. She's got a lot of range, and she's someone who really understands the tropes and kind of what she's doing. And so sometimes when you read romance, like, and as with any genre, you pick something up and you're like, oh, the writing in this is trash. This is no good. Even if you kind of like enjoy the tropes or enjoy the characters, if the writing is so bad, like it won't rescue it. And I feel like we've all been there, and maybe we even picked up some books for this particular topic that just did not make the cut. But this is not like endemic to romance. This is everything. But when you see romance being done like by such like a competent author who just really knows what they're doing and can really craft a story, it's always such a delight, especially because she has such a wonderful back catalog of material. So the book that I chose of the Reluctant Royal series is Duke by Default, because I think it's really funny that people think they can just like in this day and age either not know that they're a duke or think that they can just keep that a little old secret. Like, we've all got the internet. We've all got the internet. And so if you're a duke, we're going to know you're a duke. Anyways, this is about Patricia Hobbs, who is a Black New York socialite who is a hot mess. She cannot remember to go to appointments. She kind of struggles and fails in everything that she tries. Despite her making every effort, things just kind of fall out of hand. She forgets things. She misses appointments. She just can't seem to focus and get things done that need to get done. And this is especially hard because she has a twin sister, Reggie, who does everything perfectly. She is accomplished. She has a great job. She has a great family. She has her life together. Her parents trust her and believe that she is the responsible one, and Portia is the messy one. And so Portia decides that she is going to solve all of her life's problems by moving to Scotland and becoming an apprentice to a sword maker, like you do. I don't know that there's like a ton of like pre-qualifications that you need to do this, but apparently not. So she's going to go become an apprentice to Tavish Mackenzie. Ooh, Corene, that is some handwriting that you've done. There are letters there that are not letters, but I'm pretty sure his name is Tavish. Tavish Mackenzie, gruff but lovable, super buff blacksmith who makes armor and swords that are not at all phallic. It's fine. He's a great guy. He's a great guy, but like kind of like, let's keep it business. Let's keep the business, which I respect because he's running a business. He's running a business. And she's an apprentice, but she's really hot. And then she finds out that he is a secret duke. Or is a duke and he knows a secret, he just doesn't really care about it. And she's like, maybe you should care and you should have a makeover. And then they fall in love. I read this a while ago, and mostly what I remember is like, can you just become an apprentice sword maker? Like, don't you have to take like welding classes or something? Apparently not. It's fine. She's a socialite. She's got time. And she just kind of like toddles off to Scotland, and there's like plucky little orphans, and we've got to save the building through duking it. That maybe is not a verb that I think it is. Anyways, he's like hot. He's he's got arms from the sword making. Sword making is apparently a lot more lucrative than I thought it would be in this day and age. The reason why I really love this book, other than it's by Alyssa Cole, who I really love, is that the main character has ADHD. And through the process of it, she realizes that she has ADHD. So all of her life, she thought that she is a failure and has so much anxiety and self-loathing about it of why can't I just do this? Why can't I just do a normal task that everyone seems to be able to do? Why can't I just keep track of things in the way that everyone seems to be able to do so easily and so simply? And why doesn't my brain just work? And with that comes so much negativity and self-loathing, because it's not as if Portia isn't trying. She's trying her entire life to find a career that she loves and commit to something and really kind of make the life that she wants, but she just can't because her brain isn't wired that way. And so in women, ADHD is often underdiagnosed because it doesn't present in a fairly stereotypical way. And so a lot of the symptoms that Portia has, and even though her family is like affluent and rich and kind of has the resources, no one clocks it because it doesn't present in a way that we typically think of ADHD. And so when she finally kind of discovers this on the internet and she starts going through all the symptoms and she realizes that she has this and maybe can kind of get some help in her life and kind of communicates that to her parents don't believe her, which is just devastating because that they believe that kind of this way that her brain works is just her personality. That's who she is rather than, being neurotypical and having to kind of approach your life and approach the world in a different way. And so I thought that this was, again, like romance is expanding its borders in so many cool and interesting ways. And I think in some ways, like its examination of mental health issues or neurodiversity. Both Sadie and I really like The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. And so like, I love that romance is talking about these things in such what feels like a very truthful and very sincere way and saying, hey, like this is just a part of you. It isn't who you are. And hey, you still get like hot romance swordsmiths. Like it can work out for you. Which I really love that about romance. I love that is what it's doing right now, is that it's talking about a lot of these issues, sometimes specifically issues for kind of like women or queer people. And it's kind of bringing them to the forefront in a genre that we don't expect it. And so that you don't feel like you're being kind of like force-fed an issue book. It's just, this is an aspect of this character and this is how it affects them. And so I love that it is really bringing that into this genre that's becoming more accessible to a lot of people because of the way that it's written and because it's tropes that our brains love. We love them so much. And so, yeah, I really do recommend this book. I love Alyssa Cole. I also really liked her thrillers. I think she's great. So if you're looking for kind of like a very fun modern day romance series with a fantastic Black protagonist, you could definitely check out A Duke by Default. Part of the reluctant. Again, why would you be reluctant? It's job security, for goodness sakes.
Because all you want to do is just work on your swords in peace, Corene.
Oh, but this lady, she wants romance and kisses, and they're distracting you from the forge.
So true. So true. I have to say that I am a sucker for a good Scottish-based romance. I am. It's where my heart lies. It is. Yeah. So that one, I might have to pick that one up. I might have to. Excellent. Well, I did not come up with another question. So
Okay. No, I have the perfect ending to this episode, Sadie, unless you have like a cool romance quote. Okay, I'm going to circle us back to the beginning and I'm going to ask and end with the question, is romance dead?
No, that's a tough one. I'm not really an optimist, so I don't feel inclined to say yes, but it lives on in fiction.
Well, I was gonna say, or further, do people go to fiction because romance is dead in real life?
I feel like the greatest expression of romance, whether like romantic or platonic, is after a long day or waking up early in the morning and someone has made a cup of tea for you just the way you like it. And in that moment, I believe that romance is alive and eternal.
I think that's the perfect way to end the episode. So, dear listeners, I hope that all of you are able to find that person who can make that cup of tea or coffee or whatever it is that you enjoy to drink in the exact perfect way that you like it. And once you do, you will know that romance is alive and well. Have a wonderful day, everyone. I am so sorry, Virginia, and we will see everybody soon.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.